Away from the bread factory.
Okay. Hey everybody, this is Sarah Hicks, and today this will be my demonstration speech on how to make challah bread. So challah is a traditional Jewish bread, and it's usually eaten on the Sabbath day and on special occasions like weddings and then some holidays. So it can have several different shapes. It's usually braided into anywhere from a 3 to 6 strand loaf, and then for the special occasions, sometimes it's shaped into a braided crown or even into a bird shape, just depending on the occasion and the specialness of it. So the normal bread shape, the one that I normally do, is just a 3-stranded braid. This recipe makes enough to make a large 6-stranded braided loaf, but it's very large. So what I normally do is separate it into 2 and make 2 3-stranded loaves, and they end up being about this big each, and it's the perfect size. That shape is said to have originated in Germany from a traditional bread in that area. But today I'm going to show you the beginning steps of how to make this bread. It takes about 4 hours in total, so I can't show you everything, but I'll just show you the most important part, which is making the dough. So the first thing you need is 4 cups of all-purpose flour, not self-rising. And I like to sift my flour so that there are no lumps in it. And when you're dipping your flour out, it's best to spoon it into the measuring cup instead of packing it in. And then once you get it about full, just scrape the excess off the top. Have a flat top. That's 1 cup.
That's right.
Okay, this is 2 cups. And 4. So before I start doing all that, the first thing you really should do is put your yeast in 1 cup of lukewarm water. You don't want it too hot because it will kill it, and you don't want it too cold because then you won't activate it and you'll be in a mess. So this is 1 package of instant yeast. It's about 2 1/4 of a teaspoon. So you just put it in the water. Stir it around a little bit.
Your fingers clean.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
And then you let it sit until it becomes, there'll be like a foamy mixture on top. So I like to sift my flour just so there aren't any lumps in it, and it makes it easier to knead and mix together. So do this really quickly. And then the next step, you're going to add 1/4 cup of sugar, and that will go in with your dry ingredients, so the flour. And I usually just put it in the sifter and it goes ahead and mixes it all together, so you don't have to worry about mixing that with a whisk or anything, and it will save you some dirty dishes. And then it also takes 2 teaspoons of salt. There's 1. And 2. I usually just put it all through the sifter so you don't have to stir it or anything. Just saves you a step. of your dry ingredients. This isn't working. There we go. So you've got like a little indentation in the middle, and this is where you'll put your eggs and your oil. The next step is you put 2 whole eggs in, and then the yolk of a 3rd egg, and then the white of that, the 3rd egg is reserved, and I usually put it back in the refrigerator because it takes about 4 hours until you need it again. And it's used as an egg wash at the end to brush over your bread. So there's 1 egg, and you just put them right in the middle of that little indentation in your dry ingredients. That's 2 eggs, 2 whole eggs. And then the 3rd one, has to be separated, and just the yolk of the 3rd one goes in. And then you add 1/4 of a cup of vegetable oil. Usually unflavored is best. And that goes in the middle with the eggs. Then you just whisk around these wet ingredients in the middle, and you can pull in a little flour from the edge like this, but it's best just to mix it just enough until you've broken the yolks of the eggs, and it's it'll be sort of thick and yellow like this, and this is called making a slurry dough. And then once you've done that, your yeast should be about ready. You can zoom in on this so they can see. It has sort of a foamy mixture on top. Mine's not quite ready, but then that goes on top of this. And then once you've done all of that, you just mix everything together. You can either knead it by hand or with a mixer. I normally do with a mixer with the dough hook attachments for about 6 or 8 minutes because it's quicker, it's less messy, and you don't have to get it all over your hands. But if you prefer to knead it by hand, you can do it for about 10 minutes, and you'll know that it's ready when it stays in a ball shape. It'll form like a nice little ball, and you can move it around, and it looks like bread dough. So once that is done, you'll need a large bowl. I just use another mixing bowl, and the recipe says well greased, so I just put, since the bread uses the vegetable oil in the mix, I just use the vegetable oil to oil the bowl down. Like 1/2 teaspoon or a teaspoon will cover your bowl plenty. Just make sure that it's well greased, and then you'll put your dough into the bowl and cover it. I usually use a clean dishcloth to cover mine. You just cover it and sit it in a warm place. What I normally do is turn the oven on about 200, 250, 275, somewhere in that range, depending on how hot the day is and how hot the kitchen already is. And just sit the bowl on top and let it rise. That has to rise for about 2 hours initially. And once it's risen the first time, you put it on a well-floured surface, and then you separate the dough. What I do, since I make 2 loaves, I separate it into 2 equal parts, and then from those parts separate those into 3 strands, and you just roll them out into ropes that are about 16 inches long, something like that, about this long, and then you just braid them together and put them on a baking sheet. You can use either parchment paper or like cooking spray, butter, vegetable oil, whatever you like to use to grease your pans for the oven. I usually just use pan cooking spray, spray the pan well, and then lay the loaves on top of the pan, put it back on top of the oven for about an hour to rise again. And then once that's done, it has to rise for about an hour, but I usually set my timer for about 40 minutes because before you bake it, you have to prepare your egg wash to put on the loaves, since it is an egg-enriched yeast bread. So at about 40 minutes, I get the reserved egg white out of the refrigerator. You put about a tablespoon of water in it, and I just use a whisk to whisk it up until there's some bubbles on top. Then if you have like a barbecue brush, I just use that to brush it over the tops of the loaves, and you want to make sure that you get it in all the creases and around the sides. And what this does is when it bakes, it makes it nice and shiny and brown all over. It makes it really pretty. So once that's done, you turn your oven on about 350, and after it's been about an hour, you'll know when the bread's ready to go in the oven, because it'll be nice and risen and puffy again like your first dough had been when it was risen. So you just put that in the oven for about 30, 35, 40 minutes, just depending on how fast your oven heats up and everything. And you have to turn it once in the middle of the baking. I usually set my timer for about 17 minutes, and then you just do a 180 of your baking pan and put it back in case there are any hot spots in your oven that could cause it to brown unevenly. And then I set it again for another 17 minutes and check it, and if it needs to brown some more, I just turn the oven off and let it stay until it looks brown enough. And then once that's done, you just take it out, be careful with it, and put it on cooling racks. And then you can eat it warm. You can wait until it cools to eat it. What I like to do is wait until the next day, slice it up, and make some nice French toast. And it's really good. So I hope that you learned a lot, and bread making is something that I really enjoy, and I hope that maybe through this speech you learned how you can enjoy it too.